Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Much better. Wake up! So thank you for coming. Today is the first day of the month, and we are gonna talk about New Testament. Wow, that's a bad writing over here. New Testament is the theme of the month, and Marcio is gonna start with the Scriptures of Mathew. But before we start, Otto, over there, is gonna do the initial reading and prayer for us.
Alright, so the reading today is from the book Happy Life, from Divaldo Pereira Franco, by Joana de Angelis. In all circumstances, be yourself. Do not try to appear better than you are, or underestimate yourself. Do not appear to be what you're not. As you yearn for a better position, work hard to achieve it. When you discover imperfections, strive to improve yourself. Both the person who exhibits abilities that he does not possess and the person who hides those that he does possess are lying. Be genuine in the way to acquire dignity. Going up is slow for everyone. The person who is winning the battle now began earlier. The person who is struggling now will win his battle later. Do not be embarrassed by the fact that you are a spirit on probation. In their time, your friends of today walked the road that you are now on. And now, with this message, let's just close our eyes and thank God for the opportunity of being together again here in this blessed house to learn about the gospel, to learn about the path to happiness. Let's ask God, let's ask Jesus to give the light, the enlightenment to our brother Marcio, who is going to provide us the lecture today, so that he can provide us the best of his knowledge and the best of Jesus' knowledge, so that we can grow in our spiritual path. And so be it.
Alright, good morning everyone.
Good morning.
It's a pleasure to be here again. Let's just set up my notes here. Alright, as Raquel said, not the month of the new treatment, but the New Testament. And we're gonna talk about through this month on the four testaments that we got from Matthew, John, etc. And I'm gonna start with Matthew, and I'm gonna quickly go through what is in it for us, right? What we can get from the Scriptures of Mathew, as well as I want to talk a little bit about Matthew as the apostle. So we cannot talk about the book without talking about the apostle, right? But let's start with what was proposed to us. If I make it work.
It's in PDF. Mars, I believe it's in PDF.
No, it was working. Anyway.
PowerPoint in PDF does not work.
Yeah.
It does. I tested.
Try.
Thank you, Mark.
Yeah, it's working.
All right. So I got some information about the Gospel of Matthew through the book Estudo Aprofundado da Doutrina Espírita. In English would be deep study of the spiritual doctrine from Brazilian Spiritist Federation, and as well as reading a little bit about the gospel. I have the Bible at home, and I look at what we have there, and I also have the gospel translated by Haroldo Dutra Dias. It's a very recent translation. I know they did a great job learning the language and translated from the original ones into Portuguese. Unfortunately, it's not in English, but for us who's Brazilians and who speak Portuguese, it's a good way to understand it, because he brought a lot of good information there and notes that about the culture, because that's what we do wrongly when we read these books, right? We try to understand those things with the words there's there, putting in our lives today. And what Haroldo did, and what we should be doing when we read the gospel, is try to understand the culture of that time, right? What happened at that time, especially if you think about the parables, right, that Jesus talked to us all the time. All those parables apply it to that time, right, to the customs of that and behaviors that happened at that time. So if we bring things from that time to today, most of them may not make sense for us, right? So we need to always, when you're reading those passages, we need to try to understand what has happened in that time, so we can compare to what has happened to us today. Not that our vices, the things that we need to work in ourselves, is different from what we are dealing with 2,000 years ago, right? Of course, we are better than 2,000 years ago. We love progress. We are reincarnated all the time. We know all of that, but there is a lot of things that we have in common with those people. With us at that time, right? So, the Gospel of Matthew was writing in between 80 and 100 years after Jesus, right? And that Gospel was in the moment that the Christianism and Jesus' teachings was already below the limits of Israel, right? And it was not the first one, it was the second. It was Mark was the first gospel that we know, and then Matthew came with this his tests. And the Scriptures notes today was found in Palestine, wrote in Greek in a good literary style. Later it was translated to Latin. So it is always said that there is no evidence of that, but some scholars said that it was right. The original one was really in Hebraic, and there is no evidence of that. It's just a curious fact that I thought you brought in. And because of Matthew's job, and we're gonna see later what his job is, we can assume that he was the most well-educated and well-known in the city because of his job. He was a tax collector that we're going to explore a little bit more. But that's why when we see his texts, the Gospel of Matthew compared to the others, he has a more complete, long and better descriptions of the passages that happened to Jesus, right? And it's interesting to see as well, as you read through it, you're going to notice that he mentioned a lot about the Old Testament, right? So it says in the compilation that Fab did, they mentioned that it probably was written, the Gospel of Matthew was written to the Jewish people at that time, right? So he was always trying to show that Jesus was the Messiah that the Jewish people was expecting. So many times in the books you can see him mentioning, this is what Jesus did, and this is what was in the Old Testament for as what is the name? A prophecy, right? That the Messiah would come. So there is the first chapter, for example, in the Gospel of Matthew, it talks about how Jesus was born, right? and the very first item is all the family tree from Abraham to Jesus, and it shows there all the fathers, right? It's all about the men of that family, right? Until get to Jesus, because that was in the prophecy that the Messiah would come from Abraham family, right? Would be a descendant of Abraham. And then another one on the chapter 5, verses 21 to 48. You may recall the 10 commitments, right? Those 10 commitments that was part of the Old Testament. Matthew comes to us and explains 6 of them with different words, right? With different, not words, a different meaning for us, right? A better understanding of those 10 commandments. And that's what we in the Gospel according to the Spirit, we also see it, right? We have even now more to our days how to interpret those 10 commandments, because it's not different, right? What Abraham brought with the 10 commandments is not different from what we need to do today. The difference is because of the society that we live today, because of what we are used to today, the way of we read that may be different. We need to interpret that in a different way, right? So thinking about the Gospel of Matthew, the way it is organized is not by dates. It's not a historical facts happening. There's no chronological way when you're reading it. You're gonna notice the way that he put it, but it starts with Jesus' incarnation, how he was born, all the family members, etc. And in the chapters 1 to 7, it shows a lot about trying to convince the Jewish people that Jesus was the Messiah, right? So it's a lot of comparison between what happened to Jesus and what was in the prophecies from the Old Testament. And then 8 and 9 are more chapters is talking about healing and miracles that Jesus did. In fact, there is from the next part of the chapters, it also has some miracles, but those 2 chapters is very much only about healing. And then 10 to 25, it's all the Jesus teachings, Jesus gospel per se, where we can get all the the essence of what Jesus brought to us. And then the last chapters 26 to 28, it talks about the last days of Jesus in earth, what happened with his crucifixion, and I hope everyone is aware of that, right? So bring all of this, I mentioned before that we need to read and understand all this Gospel of Matthew comparing to our society today. That's what Kardec did, right? With the Gospel according to Spiritism. He kind of translated everything there into our days. Well, at least the days of Kardec, right? Almost 160 years ago, I guess. And so that's what Kardec did for us. And just so you know, Matthew Gospel has 28 chapters, 1,055 verses. 347 of these verses here are mentioned in the Gospel according to Spiritism. It's about 33%, just in the Gospel according to Spiritism. I didn't compare with the Genesis from Kardec, another book that probably we have a little bit more because of the miracles, right? And then 60% of all the verses on the Gospel is from Matthew. What does it mean? Absolutely nothing. It's just for some geeks and nerds like me would like to see these numbers, right? But I thought it was interesting. I spent some time doing all this analysis here on the Gospel according to Spiritism just to know what that, but it doesn't mean anything, right? But what is interesting, I didn't brought all of them, but I brought some. There is very important, as we study the Gospel according to Spiritism, And if you come here on Wednesdays when you're studying the Gospel according to Spiritism, you're gonna recognize this. It was really funny because I never read the Bible. I had it at home, like I have, all the Catholic people has. We have that at home, right? If you go to a hotel, most of the time you'll see there. So I started reading it from the chapter 1, and it was funny because I started reading. I remember this on the Gospel according to Spiritism, and then I kept reading another few pages. Another one. I remember seeing this. That's when I got to stop. Okay, I need to know how much is it, and I start to do these calculations here. So it's interesting to read the Bible now with a different perspective, because if you read just without any concept, without reading, for me at least, it was without reading the Gospel according to Spirit, it was hard. It was really hard to understand what they're saying. So here are some examples of important things about Spiritism that we can see on the Gospel of Matthew. So Kardec brought the Sermon of the Mount and very specific topics here. And I think this is the chapter 5, Blessed are the Afflicted, is one of the biggest ones, right? So from 3 items on the Sermon of the Mountain, Kardec brought one entire chapter for us. So how great is that, right, guys? So if just reading 3 phrases here, Kardec brought it together and helped us to understand through an entire chapter. Well, more than one, right? From the Sermon of the Mountain. Reincarnation, the items verses 10 to 13 on chapter 17. We can learn about this on the chapter. No one can see the kingdom of God unless he is born again. And just to remind you guys, what these items are when we talk about reincarnation. So, and if you got the Gospel according to Spirit, you're gonna see most of the chapters start some passage from the Bible, from the Gospel. And then Kardec go in with the spirits, right? All the message that he got from the Spirit, he explained those passages. So in the Incarnation is that passage where the disciples ask Jesus, why then do the teachers of the law say the Elijah must come first? And Jesus replied, to be sure, Elijah comes and will restore all things. But I tell you, Elijah has already come, and they did not recognize him, but have done to him everything they wished. In the same way of the Son of Man is going to suffer on their hands. Then the disciples understood that he was talking to them about John the Baptist. So this passage is one of the many that we have in the Gospel that demonstrate that at that time they already understand about reincarnation. And by the way, Jewish people in that time, they believe in reincarnation, not resurrection, as we have been saying for years now. So this is a passage that shows clearly that reincarnation was part of the society at that time, right? And it was not new. But I have to confess, I prefer the story about Nicodemus when he talking about Nicodemus. That's not in the Gospel of Matthew. It's the Gospel of John. I was so frustrated when I saw that because and that story when Jesus is talking with Nicodemus and he tells Nicodemus that he what is the name of the chapter? No one can see the kingdom of God unless he is born again. Jesus explained that, Nicodemus asked, but how can an old man can go back to his mom or a woman belly and born again? And Jesus said, no, it's about the flesh and the spirit that need to be reborn. So it explains about about reincarnation. And again, Kardec goes and explains that in details. Another one that we have a chapter in the book in the Gospel according to Spiritism that is very important for us. The Spirit of Truth, that is on chapter 11, 28 to 30. I'm gonna read for you guys what Matthew tells us. Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me. I'm gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. So after that, Jesus said that we're gonna have a spirit that will come and give us more information, right? And that's the entire chapter that we understand Spiritism as that consoling spirit that is coming and helping us, right? The consolation that we have been expecting for years since Jesus discarnate. So we have been waiting, and Spiritism come with a lot of different perspective, and not different perspective, but a new meaning, something that is go deeper, and then we can really and truly understand what Jesus was telling us 2,000 years ago. Because as you know, Jesus brought everything for us, but we were not ready to understand it yet, right? So we still learning what he meant all the time, right? We're still trying to unveil everything and really put in practice what Jesus is teaching us, right? So that's the one of the hardest thing for us. Another thing that is important for us in the Spiritism is about charity, and we have an entire chapter. Without charity, there is no salvation, and that again we have I don't have an over here. We have items on the Gospel of Matthew about charity, 31 to 46, right? And then finally we have in the collection of Spiritist prayers, the last chapter in the Gospel according to Spiritism, we have in the Gospel of Matthew as well there, right? And when I was reading about it, I was sort of, it's many times we say the Lord's Prayer, at least I did. Many times I just repeated. I was not even sure what I was repeating, right? I didn't understand that. I was just doing how everybody used to do. How I learned it from my parents. They said, this is the Lord's Prayer, you must learn it. And then we go to catechism in English, I don't know. When we go to the church as a child and we learn about Jesus, it really comes like something that you need to memorize and repeat. And then go to the church, I memorize it and I repeated that. For many, many years I had done that without even understanding what it was saying. And then Kardec again come. And in the Gospel according to Spiritism, he explained item by item. Of course, Kardec with the spirits is helping him, right? Item by item of the Lord's Prayer. And that was the first moment that I said, when I read that, I said, oh my God, what I have been doing, right? Just repeating some words, that's not what I meant when I was doing that. So we start and you learn again with Kardec to pray. So this is just a few examples, guys. As I said, we have 347 and brought some of them here, just to give an example of how we connect this, how nice it can be read the Gospel of Matthew with the support of the Gospel according to Spiritism. That we can combine, we can look both things and understand a little bit more what was happening at that time, right? So this is the Gospel according to the Gospel of Matthew. But let's talk about who Matthew was. And he was a tax collector. And we know that because of the three Gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, all of them describe Matthew. It's interesting because in Mark and Luke, they call Matthew as Levi. And it's only in the Matthew's book that it's called Matthew, the apostle is Matthew, not Levi. And that's why, and we could know that it's the same person because of the job of the person that this apostle at that time, right? three of them describe this as the tax collector. And so I'm gonna read for you, where's my gospel here, what the gospel according to Spiritism, how it is described, because in the beginning of the gospel according to Spiritism, in the introduction, Kardec did a part of that chapter that talk about historical facts. Remember I was saying that it's important for us to understand the historical facts of that time. So Kardec helped us in the Gospel according to Spiritism, putting a piece of the chapter there. And it talks about the publicans and the tax collectors. So the publicans are how all the tax collectors was known at that time, right? So he says here, publicans. In the ancient Rome, it was the name given to those who were leaseholders of public taxes. They were in charge of collecting taxes and income of every sort, whether in Rome itself or in other parts of the empire. The name publican was later extended to all who were in charge of administering public monies, and also to their subaltern agents. Under Roman rule, taxation was what the Jews found hardest to accept, and it caused them the greatest aggravation, giving rise to several revolts and turning to religious issues since it was regarded as a contrary to the law. You remember that many times in the gospel we're gonna see the publicans as the sinners, right? As those bad guys that was there to destroy the laws. And for the Jewish people at that time, they was doing something bad to their people because they were being dominated by them, right? And then Kardec continues, a powerful party was even formed, headed by a certain Judas of Galonite, having its principle the refusal of paying taxes. Thus the Jews despised taxes, and consequently all those who were in charge of collecting them. So they hated those people that was doing that. And by the way, there was Jewish people being taxing collectors, right? It was not Roman people that came from Rome and was doing the job. No, it was people from their society doing their job. Hence their aversion toward publicans of all categories, among whom could be found many decent individuals, by who, due to their occupation, were despised along with all who associated with them. Distinguished Jews believed they jeopardized themselves by having any close relations with them. So the publicans were hated by the Jewish people, even though there are some Jewish in that doing that job. But interesting what Kardec brought here, saying, among whom could be found many decent individuals. But they were not, only bad people, only people trying to destroy everything in the Jewish. It was a job, as any other one, right? And Matthew was one of them. Levi was one of them. And in the Gospels, we found that very simple explanation about how Jesus go to Matthew and invite him. He just say, "Follow me." Jesus told him, and Levi got up and followed him. Or in Luke, he says exactly the same. He saw the name of Levi sitting at the tax booth. "Follow me," Jesus said to him, and Levi got up, left everything, and followed him. But in the book Boa Nova, or the Good News, unfortunately not yet translated to English, but in the book Boa Nova, it gives us a little bit more details where Humberto de Campos, through Chico Xavier, he tell a little bit better the story that what happened there. So what happened was Jesus meeting with Matthew, and he asked, "What do you do, Levi?" And surprised but magnetized by his gentle look, he answered, "I collect the taxes of the people due to Herod." firm and docile, Jesus asked, "Do you want to come with me to collect the goods of heaven?" Matthew could not define the emotion in his heart, and so, answering to Jesus, "Lord, I am ready." And that's how Matthew started to work with Jesus. It was not just, "Hey Matthew, come, let's work." It was Jesus invited him in a way that he couldn't say no, right? I could imagine someone come to me and asking, let's collect the goods of heaven. It's much more profound job than just, collecting taxes, doing our work every day. So Jesus invited him, and of course, Matthew was prepared, as all the apostles. They were prepared. They just reunited. Jesus was just the beginning, right, of Jesus' mission in earth, putting together the 12 apostles to work with him, right? So the apostles, they had a mission, and then we're gonna talk about the mission later. But that was the beginning of all the work that they will have to do with Jesus. So Jesus started putting together. You may recall the story when he was in the in Capernaum and start to talk with the fishermen and get Pedro and the others. So that's how it worked with Matthew. And remember that I said that in the Gospel of Matthew was the one of more elaborated, and we knew that he was well educated, because to do this job for as a tax collector for the empire, the Roman Empire, it was not a simple job, right? It was someone educated would need to do that job. And if you think about it, 2,000 years ago, how many people was educated? Probably they don't have public schools like we have today, right? It should be a very small number of people that have access to education at that level. So, being a tax collector, he was very well educated, and he probably was very well educated as well on the laws, Jewish laws, and everything that the church at that time, not the church, the Jewish people at that time would need to know about the Old Testament. So, like Paul of Tarsus on the book Paul and Stephen, right? Paul was another one that knew a lot about the laws, the Jewish laws, and all the prophecies, all the stories that they had. So he was well educated, and that's why he could do that work, comparing Jesus and the prophecies, right? So Matthew was one of the 12 apostles. But what apostle means, and it was interesting to see in the book from Fab about the difference between apostle and disciple, because sometimes, I don't know you guys, but I have been using both words as the same thing, and I learned that it's not. It's totally different, and I went to the dictionary as well to bring these two definitions here. And it was funny because every time that I put apostle there, it was showing the 12 disciples of Jesus, people selected by Jesus, etc. But very in the bottom of it was explained, okay, the meaning of the word is, so apostle, it means the messenger, right, who's giving a message. And the disciple is those that are learning. And that for me was a kind of aha moment. I said, now I understand the difference between disciple and apostle. So disciple was that just learn. They were there listening, learning, maybe putting practice, but they are not preaching it. They are not go and send the message to others. That was the job for the apostles. Because in the book Estudo e Vida, Studying and Live, from Chico Xavier, excuse me, and Valdo Vieira, through the spirits André Luiz and Emmanuel, it tells us about the story about 70 disciples that Jesus had helping them. So those disciples, they they were not selected as the 12 apostles, but they were there and they were learning very close to Jesus, everything that he was there to teach us. And in the book Boa Nova, Chico Xavier, through Humberto de Campos, he also tells about the 500 disciples that just after Jesus discarnate, they got the message. They were all reunited together, missing Jesus, missing all the teachings, missing his love and his presence. And Jesus came to them and talked directly to their hearts and their minds, and give the message that they were the ones who would help him to spread the gospel. And those spirits, according to the book, has been incarnating in many different religions, many different places, many different societies, levels, politicians, whatever you name it, just to spread this word. So these 5 disciples has been there. These 500 messengers has been there, working to help us as a society, to the entire humanity to continue progressing, right? And of course, we cannot leave without talking about what it means for us as spiritists, right? What does a spiritist means? And in the Gospel according to Spiritists, there is this definition that there's a big definition, but you just copy one piece of it that says, true spiritists are recognized by their moral transformation and the efforts they make to overcome their evil inclinations. So that's what we need to do, right? Do our moral transformation. And what moral transformation mean? That means that we question our conscience, and if we have done everything that we are supposed to do, if we have done all the good that we are supposed to do on that day. So there is another chapter that talks about the moral persons, and it tells that the moral persons that at the end of the day, before I go to sleep or in the moment of the day, will stop and will think, have I done everything that I could? Have I helped all the people around me the way that I could? And not that we're gonna punish ourselves. No, I didn't. I missed it to help this person or that person. I could have done this, I could have done that. No, I just look at and I start, because at the moment that we recognize those things, we can do a change, right? And what was interesting to see there, we question our conscience. That's the word that is in the Gospel according to Spiritism. So why in the conscience? Why we ask our conscience? And then we go to the Spirit's book on question 621 that asks, is where the laws of God is written? And the answer is in the conscience. So it is in the conscience where we have all we need in terms of law, God's laws. There is all imprinted there. We just need to stop, and think. We live in a world where so many, our cell phones are already popping up something to read, and messages and things that we need to know, etc. And it's all there. It's all in there. We need in the middle of all of that, we need to stop and question our conscience if we have done everything, because it's there. It's not. It will not come. Will not come in a, well, maybe the Spirit will help us. You're not thinking about it, so I'm gonna send you something in your cell phone, and you're gonna start seeing messages in Facebook or whatever, right? But we need to stop. We need to look for that time where we can stop and question our conscience, because that will help us to move on, help us to find out what we need to change in ourselves. And that's the moral transformation that we're gonna have. And then let's talk about the mission, because that's another chapter that we have in the Gospel of Mathew, chapter 10. It's much larger than what we have here, but I try to summarize in a few items. So the apostles has, in the Matthew, it says, As you go, proclaim this message. The kingdom of heaven has come near. Heal the sick, raise the dead, cleanse those who have leprosy, drive out demons. Freely you have received, freely give. Do not get any gold or silver or copper to take with you in your belts. No bag for the journey, an extra shirt or sandal of a staff. For the worker is worth its keep. And for us, in the Gospel according to Spiritists, there is our mission as well as the Spiritists. There are Kardec, and not Kardec, but the Spirits. It's a spirit that is a protector of one of the mediums that was helping Kardec to put it together. The Spirit said, "Go and preach the divine word. The time has come in which you must sacrifice your habits, labors, and futile concerns in its propagation. Go forth and proclaim, and attentive to peoples will joyfully take in your words of consolation, fraternity, hope, and peace." If you look, it's not that different, right? Here in the end, it talks about no gold, no silver, nothing else. And then the very beginning of the Spirit's book, the Gospel according to Spiritism, it tells us that we need to sacrifice our habits, labors, and futile concerns, right? So we need to. It's when he said our sacrifice our habits, is those old habits that we have, like gossipy or you name it, right? And here it was about. Material things, and here is a little bit less about material things, more about what we have been doing every day on our words, our actions. Yes, there is a little bit about material things here, right? But it's not. It has not been the most important thing these days anymore. We still need to be away from the material world, but it's more important that we connect with our emotions, with our vices, and transform all of that, right? And again, the spirits come and tell us to go and proclaim, go and talk about the gospel of Jesus, right? He did here, and at that time he was saying to heal the sick, raise the dead, cleanse those who have leprosy. And today we're being told to consolation, fraternity, hope, and peace. So that's the Spiritism mission that we have a better medicine now, right? We don't need to help those on that. Let's leave it for the medicine, the doctors to do it, and let's do what we can do in terms of consolation. Someone can be going through a cancer. They can get a doctor help, but he can get from a spiritist a consolation, right? Try to understand why they have to go through that. What is in that? Being fraternal, giving hope, giving peace to that person. So that's the difference of these days, right? In the Gospel according to Spiritism, there is a question that as part of the mission of the message of this Spirit, that the Spirit asks himself, if many of those called to Spiritism have gone astray, by what signs do we recognize those who are on the righteous path? So how can we then separate those that has been going to the right path and those that are not so well? Because Spiritism is not different of any other religion, guys. I think that's important. The same way that some religions, they have people that are doing amazing work in their religion, there's those that is not doing that good, all right? And Spiritism is not different. So the Spirit answers us with to that question, saying, you will recognize them by the practice of the true charity and what they profess and practice. We recognize them by the number of afflicted to whom they take consolation. You will recognize them by their love for their neighbor, their selfishness, and their personal disinterestedness. You will recognize them finally by the triumph of their principles, for God wills the triumphs of His laws. So basically, through charity and profess and practice. So the good Spiritist, as we were saying earlier, will be practicing charity, all types of charity. Not only the material ones, but these ones here that we're talking, consolation, fraternity, hope, and peace. This is charity as well, right? Let's keep that in mind. And so they will be doing that and professing that. We'll be telling people to do that as well. Okay, so I know that I'm between. One more thing before I go to the next one. This mission. Sometimes we think mission as something bigger, very, very big, like Chico Xavier mission as a Spiritist, right? Or Mother Teresa, right? Another great spirit that came and helped so many people. We saw Divaldo Franco with all the work that he's doing there in Bahia with those kids and books and everything that he does, right? We always think mission like that big thing. Right? But all of us, we have the mission, at least to improve ourselves, could be our mission here, but we could do small things every single day to help to stop the evil or the bad habits that we have. We can share good messages. How many times we see a messaging in Facebook or whatever, you name it, we can just read it and take it for us, or we can share, right? Today we can share everything, right? And we can stop those that are not good. Why I would share, if I want a better word, why I would share some message that is not good? So we have to do the work of reading those messages, analyze and see, is this a good message to share or not, right? Be open about sharing Spiritism teachings. When it's appropriate, with friends, with family, with work, at work. I recently read a blog post from the HR lead for the company that I work for, and she was talking exactly about that. How we can talk about religion at work. So it's everything has a moment, a time, a way of doing that. When we say go and spread the word, it's not really preach like Jesus did, or like a priest, or even like someone is doing a lecture here. It's different. We need to customize the words to the scenario, to the situation that you're living there, and the most simple way of doing that is acting according to what we're studying here, putting in practice what we hear, what we study here. I think that it's we have been discussing here on Wednesday. It's the hardest thing is when we leave TSS, right? Because while you're here, we're studying, we are being nice with each other. That's much easier because everybody here is in the same mood and it's in the same vibe, and they want to do the same thing. But when you are out there, that we start to get the challenge of life is when we need to show that we have learned what we have been studying here. Okay, so I want to leave you guys with the question that Jesus did to Matthew. What do you do? And think about your readiness to be a disciple. Think about being open to become an apostle, right? And let's remember that none of the apostles, none of them was perfect, and they became apostle of Jesus, right? That's not a way to become perfect, to start being an apostle of Jesus, being this messenger, and the message doesn't need to be to a large crowd. It can start at home, with our families, with our kids. And that's it. Thanks so much.
So we still have a couple minutes. Does anyone have any questions, any comments? Anyone online? Yeah? Everyone's hungry, right? Okay.
Almost there.
Thank you. Yeah, so as you guys know, we have the Lunch and Learn today. So we'll set up for our passes, and then after we'll organize everything so we can have lunch together. Okay, thank you everyone online for joining us. See you next Sunday or Wednesday.